This week on the Organized Life podcast.
We are not perfect. We don't even do our problems perfectly. So there's times
we mess up our mess ups.
Yeah. So on the days that we don't do it, when we do our problem a little bit less, or we are not at all, those are the days that we're looking for. Those are the days we're going to be the detective on. And so that day that you're coming off vacation, that's not a great day to be a detective on. But there's days in the past when maybe you was just a little bit better for you. What would you notice? What did you notice you were doing on those days?
Right.
That would be the clue to start working on your evening routine.
Hey, and welcome to the Organized Life podcast, where we are creating a movement with powerful organizing strategies and systems that save you space, time, energy, and money. I am your host, TakillaRene, the life organizing strategist, professional organizer, and the owner of Xtreme Audacity Organized Solutions. Thank you guys so much for joining us here today. We are on a journey to creating the organized life. And this journey to creating the organized life is not just about getting your space organized, right? It's about creating a life full of peace and productivity that pushes you towards purpose. And today I'm here with my guest, Glen, co-founder and CEO of the Stamina Lab. He is a solution-focused performing coach, a leader in sustainable energy, focus, and resilience. Welcome, Glen.
Hi, Takilla. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here on today. Listen, what excited me most about this conversation with you is that we basically have the same ideal client, right? Glen works with high-performing, health-minded professionals who look successful on paper, right? But inside they're feeling stretched, thin, mentally overloaded, and running on empty. And instead of teaching people how to hustle harder or maybe fix what's wrong, Glen helps people to build sustainable energy, focus, and resilience by organizing what's already working. And I love that so much because when I work with my clients, I want to know what's working and what's not working. And let's focus on how we can enhance what's actually working. And that's exactly what we do here on the Organized Life podcast. And right, it's not about just your physical space. So that's why I am so excited to have this conversation with you. If you are feeling unproductive, unfocused, or any of that, this conversation today is here for you, okay? So, Glen, would you do me a favor and tell the Organized Life listeners a little bit more about you and how you got started on your journey with the Stamina Lab?
Yeah, thank you. This is really an interesting journey that I've been on because I did not expect to end up here. Really where I came to it was, I have been an entrepreneur my entire life. I've done startups that, were funded and had exits and, just doing the grind. And with the last exit I had, I was left, just beaten down, burned out. And by the time you realize you're burned out, to fix it, you still have a long way to go to just get yourself out of the burnout. And so, you're living in that space for a long time, even if you recognize it and say, oh, I want something instead. And so by the time I got to there, I was in that space where I was like, oh, I need to figure out how to not do this again. At the same time, I was coming out of that experience and wondering, what I could be a perfect at or great at being a technologist and a business minded, operational, financial, all the things of the business. But what I realized is, it's the people that have to really help drive your business. And so, what we would struggle with is, we'd have initiatives that we want to put into place, and you'd have to bring people along. And that's one piece of it. And we had a great culture, and that was, that helped. But what I also realized is that people don't just come to work they're not just people that just show up at work. They have other lives that they show up
Absolutely.
And so, what I realized is, that people would show up and they'd have the problems that they were having in their lives. And as a good manager, a leader, I realized it's just not about saying, hey, when you're here, you have to do this, because they're showing up in the way that they are. And so, for example, I know we had one team member who showed up like for our Tuesday meeting every Tuesday meeting. And I'm like, why can't you show, the one thing is you need to show up for this meeting. That's one way to do about it. Or, why can't you show, well, it turns out that, something happens in his life that, was constantly causing a stress in that area. And so I was like, I realized not only do we have to work on being able to change people in the organization, but you have to really help people with the rest of their lives as well, in at least some degree. Obviously we're not doing everything, but just to help, be able to coach them in a way. So I really was asking a lot about behavior change for myself and for the people in my organization. And so I started asking questions about what actually creates sustainable behavior change. And I realized, and I found out that it's not what we think. It's not the standard. This is how you build habits and build change. It's actually it's not counterintuitive. Once you hear what it's about, it's actually very intuitive. But we're trained so much into doing the root cause analysis and figuring out what's wrong and trying to make the change from there. And obviously I can go in more details on that. But my journey was just asking these questions. And I started meeting some fantastic people. My partner, Dr. Deborah Teplo at Stamina Lab, she's our chief program officer. She's really this expert in this approach. And, we started talking, and I started learning, and I started coaching even, which is not really what my goal wasn't really to coach, but I just got so interested into it that that's where I got started and how I got here. Then we started building a company around it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting. What would you say inside the Stamina Lab and your coaching and what you do? What's your favorite part about that?
Without a doubt, it's we do two parts. So we coach people. We have a team of coaches that work with people directly, and then we obviously train our coaches in this approach, because it is not what you standard get taught regularly. So we do a training program too as well, and it's just, but in both sides, it's just seeing people saying, "Oh, this is a 180-degree difference than the way I was thinking, and this makes so much sense. This is so much more joyful. This feels so much more empowering." And just seeing that light bulb go off, and that shift that people start to make, both the coaches make and the clients make, because in this approach, the client and the coach are co-creating the solution. It's not like the coach is better than the client, or we often get, this is the coach or the expert will tell you, do this, do this, do this, and they they know best. But not in this approach. In this approach, they're co-creators, equal in this approach. The coaches are experts not in your life. You're the expert in your life. The coach is an expert in the approach and asking the right questions. And that's what it takes stress off the coach, because they're like, wait a second, I don't need to know everything about everything. And so they just need to know this, be really great at this approach and asking these questions. And then the client just feels so much more empowered, and it's so much more joyful. So the entire process is just joyful for everyone all around.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is very similar to like what I do. I have an approach, and I have a method that it doesn't really change, right? Asking the right questions, flipping on the right light switch, right? It causes the client to think. So tell me a little bit more about the approach that you guys take to help clients to get from A to B.
Sure. So this is an evidence-based, solution-focused approach, meaning there's been thousands of research studies done on it, with 100 of meta-analysis over 40 some years that shows that this does actually lead to lasting change. This is not just this is not Glen's approach or Dr. Teplo's approach. This is evidence-based, and that's what gives me so much excitement about it, and the ability to just be really firm, knowing that there's deep research behind this, and that if you follow this approach, if the coach follows the approach of the questions, and the client just has to show up and just answer the questions, that it will lead to sustainable change. This is not a short time fix or a hack or a habit that you're trying to put into place that you have to muscle through for 90 days or whatever. This approach leads to lasting change, and it starts with, one of the key questions it starts with is, what do you want instead? And asking that question really is the beginning of the journey. We start with a question about, okay, Takilla, you're here with me. What would you hope to get out of our conversation today? We need to know what directions you want to go, and that's why we ask. What do you want instead? Some people say, oh, I want to be less stressed, or I want to be, I don't want to drink as much, or I don't want to eat as much sugar or cake, or whatever the thing is that they don't want to do. And those are avoidance goals. And so, but those avoidance goals don't work because our brain doesn't know. It doesn't know don't. It doesn't feel don't. It doesn't smell don't. None of the sentences are around don't. So if I say, don't eat cake, well, our brain just knows the
I want
to taste the cake. It just hear. So every time you say it, it says, I want the cake. I want the cake.
That's so right.
You're actually, just a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, I don't want to be stressed, but your body only knows the feeling of stress. So you have to ask, well, what do you want instead?
Yeah.
We have this metaphor that where the cab pulls up to the curb and you're right there. You open the door, get into the cab, and the cab driver says, all right, Takilla, where do you want to go? Well, I don't want to go there because it stresses me out. I don't want to go there because that's bad food. I don't want. I'm like, okay. The cab driver turns around and says, okay, but I can't pull away from the curb until you tell me where you want to go. So that's the same idea. You have to have a direction. Our brain has to have a direction for us to where we want to go, because it has to follow that. It's so creative. It'll figure out how to get there. But we have to know what we want instead, and we have to describe it in all the different ways we can describe it. So that's what questions we start to ask. What would you notice if you were there and you'd be doing that? What would you feel to? What other people notice about you that when you're there? What would your pets notice about you if you're in that space? And so we had one client actually that literally said, she said, she's trying to be more calm, I think was what her goal was. And she's like, I noticed I had this one cat who would never come around me, was always, very standoffish. And lately, and she'd been working with us for over a year. And lately she's like, that cat's just been coming up and rubbing around me. And so she noticed that the cat was actually responding to her differently. So when you set that direction, you tell the cab driver where you want to go, what do you want instead, that gives your brain that direction. And so every time we have this, we just, the New Year's resolution is all about, like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, but you have to know where you want to go instead.
Absolutely. One of the questions that I put before my clients when we're doing a consultation is, if you could snap your finger or wave your wand, what would your space look like right now? If we could just make it happen, what would it look like? What would it feel like? And that's basically the same thing. Like, correct. Where is it that you want to go? Right.
And then this approach, when we train our coaches, it's, it's asking the same question 5,000 different ways. Yeah. because you never know what's going to click with something. And I could say something, I could ask the question and someone says, I don't understand what you're trying to say. What are you saying? Okay, well, let me ask it this way. Let me ask it this way. Let me ask it, because we're just trying to get to them, because lots of times people don't even think this. They don't even think about this answer. They don't even visualize it because I don't know why we just don't ever get to the point where we're thinking about that. So when we ask this question, sometimes it's people don't know, and often they'll say, "Huh," and that's when that's when you know you're making a breakthrough, because
that's right. Yeah,
I never thought of that.
That's right.
All right, now we're breaking ground. Now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah,
and then I'm sure you help them if they to get to that picture if they don't know exactly what they want.
Yeah, helping them to clear the clutter out. Right. It's the mental clutter, and just trying to focus on that one question, right? That one answer. It really just starts to expand their mind and help them to see things a little bit different.
So if that's the case, okay, I would say, I'd like it to be well, and I mean, you get this. Okay, well, I liked it to be less messy. Well, okay, but what does that less messy mean, right?
Right.
That's, I need to tell the cab driver where I go. I'm just saying how I would do it. And, but then I would, I could say, well, all the shoes would be, organized. Well, and I guess probably a follow-up question would be like, well, what would that actually, you ask more details
Yeah,
about what that would look like. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep,
Try to get
yep.
more specific, right? Yeah.
Yep, yep. And sometimes they don't know.
Yeah.
Even when you ask the questions, they don't know. And in my field, once you start to clear out the clutter, like remove the shoes and remove the clothes, and like they get a clean slate, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can see possibility. I can see what we can actually create now because you start to clear it out." Now we can put the things back, and it helps them to have a better visual of what we can actually create once we clear out a lot of clutter, right?
Yeah.
And I heard
But
you mention, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say the other thing that I would ask though, after we tell the cab driver where we want to go, and
Yeah.
this is really what gets to sustainable behavior change. This is one of the key questions that gets to sustainable behavior change. That because so many things could block us. The time of the year, the people in our lives, the work stress, the life stress, the weather. There's millions of things that want to prevent us from doing what we want to do. But when you ask this question of what difference will that make for you? What different
Ooh,
whatever the destination is, whatever your instead is, what difference will that make for you?
yeah,
And you could even ask that question multiple times. What difference would that? So if my closet was cleaned, I could be able to get to my shoes easier. Well, what difference
yeah,
would that make? Well, I'd be able to probably go do more. I have shoes for different kinds of things. I'd probably be able to
yeah,
go hiking more, am I running more, am I tennis more, whatever. Because I'll just be able to grab them. And what difference will that make? Well, I'd
yeah.
probably be healthier, and I'd be more social with my friends. And what difference would that make? And then I'd be happier. And when you ask the question long enough, you always get the happy,
You
joy,
do,
love, all the
yeah,
things. But that's what makes it possible is that now I'm not just thinking about not eating that cake. Now I'm thinking about what that world that I'm going to live in, how my joyful that will be. And so whenever one of those things that comes up to stop you from doing it, you have now your brain doesn't know the difference between the past, present, or the future. So
mm,
when we describe that future in as much detail as possible, what difference
yes,
is going to make? Now I intrinsically feel it, and our brains are
yeah,
wily brains. Just as how they're going to figure out to get to the bad thing, they'll figure out to get to that good thing as well. So even no
yeah,
matter what that wind,
mm,
weather, people, whatever, they know what that feeling is like because we've described it. They've already felt it. Therefore, they've
yeah,
already been there, and the brain will figure out a way to go do it. And it's not the exact way as possible sometimes. This is why habits, the traditional approach, can break down.
mm,
Is because if I say, okay, we're coaching someone and they say, okay, well, trying to reduce my sugar, so I don't want to eat that cake, and then the traditional approach would say, okay, well, so you had a half a pint of ice cream. They would say, oh, I had a half a pint of ice cream this week. I feel like a failure. I messed up. I know I'm not supposed to have the ice cream. I'm trying to reduce this sugar. And okay, traditional approach would say, all right, root cause analysis. Let's figure this out.
okay,
Why did you eat that half a pint of ice cream? What was the trigger? Let's figure out what the trigger is. And
mm,
then once we know that, then we're going to replace it with something else that's healthier. We hear this approach all the time. It's a standard
yes, yes,
cognitive behavioral approach
yeah,
to behavior change. Okay, let's say I got my someone called me, frustrated me. I got in a fight with something, and so I just went immediately to get that ice cream. And so, okay, the next time that person calls, what can we do? Okay, I'll go for a 5-minute walk, and uh, that game could be that's a kind of a whack-a-mole game because now, okay, that might have been the trigger this time, but there's a different trigger that happens, or a
ah,
different trigger happens. And no, so I'm in an infinite loop of doing that, and then every time I don't do exactly right, I feel like a failure. I have the guilt, I have the shame. And this is why
yeah,
the solution-focused approach is so much more joyful because we don't. They say, okay, I had to have a pint of ice cream. Okay, I don't even care why you had to have a pint of ice cream. What we ask them is, well, what kept you from eating the full pint of ice cream? What kept you from eating the full pint of ice cream? Because in that question is where you had agency. This is where you had strength. This is where you showed up for yourself. Is in that point. And so now I highlight that and I say, okay, well, why didn't you? Well, I didn't have the whole pint because I know I want to reduce my sugar, and I know I didn't have the half pint because I just wanted a taste of this and I got it. I didn't have the half pint, whatever, and what else, and what else, what else. Now we've just painted a picture of all the things that you did do right.
Yeah.
Now, how much more, how better do you feel about yourself at that point?
Absolutely.
And so now the next time a stressor happens, it could have been that phone call with that person, or it could be any other stressor that comes your way. You've identified the strengths that you brought to bear in that problem, and maybe it's not the half pint of ice cream. Maybe next time it's a bottle of wine, or it's a whatever the thing you're going to do to make you feel better, smoke a cigarette or whatever your thing is. But those skills that we identified, that agency that we identified in that moment of your half pint of ice cream, is applicable to everything.
Right.
And because you now, hey, wait a second, I am strong. I was able to stop that half a pint of ice cream. I remembered that, and it doesn't happen immediately. I mean, you could like immediately say, oh, you know what, I do have these, but you keep asking yourself this question that way to yourself, instead of beating yourself up with the guilt and shame of why you didn't succeed. And you said, okay, why did I succeed at least a little bit in some way possible? And you keep identifying that in your mind. That's where that 180-degree mind shift comes in that I mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah.
That your mind starts to see, wait a second, I am doing things, and I'm moving in the direction I want to be, because you've never fallen off the horse completely. You are all, because change doesn't happen linearly. It happens and fits in spurts. So all you're trying to remember to yourself and remind yourself with that question is that you are on the path of the person you want to be. In fact, everyone who's listening to this podcast right now is on the this is evidence that you are on the path of the person you want to be.
Absolutely. That's so good. I 100% agree with that, because when I talk about going on this journey of creating the organized life, like if you're listening to this, you're on the journey. If you sent me an email, you're on the journey. If you had a consultation, you're on the journey. So, Glen, when you hear the organized life, what does that mean to you beyond tidying up the home, behind getting your schedule together or a routine, especially in how someone feels in their mind and body? When you hear the organized life, what does that mean to you? What do you hear?
Yeah, I think one of the things I really liked about wanting to be on this podcast was because I think that it's so much more than just organizing the closet or the cleaning up the clutter. It's defining what do you want instead of that. I want that organized life, and that definition of organized can mean a lot to people. That's why we don't assume that people this is, oh, what are tactics to be less stressed? I'm like, well, what does that mean? What if you don't want to be stressed? What do you want instead? So some people don't want to go do meditation because they don't want to lose their sharpness. They don't want to go do that because you're high performers and they want to keep that sharpness. So I don't want the stress, but I want the sharp. I want to be sharp. Or some people want to say, I don't want the stress. I want to be calm and relaxed. We don't know what that organized life is. We don't know. That's up to each individual person. So that's what I would ask, the people who are listening is, what does that mean for you? What does that instead look like for you? And what difference will that make?
Yeah, what difference would that make? I heard you asking those questions, and it was two things that came into my mind. It's the philosophy of ask why 7 times and you'll get to the root of the problem, right? So kid, ask why, and then after you get that answer, then ask why again. And the other thing that came to mind is the way that I ask it sometimes is, what impact would that have on your life? If we created that, right? So it's the same thing, but like you said, it's asking it in a different way, like, because they may not understand it one way, but they'll understand it another way. So that's one thing I was loving about like what we do. It's very similar in how we help people, and at the same time very different, right?
Yeah.
So many people think about organization, and they think about how they can fix the chaos in their life, right? And what I love about your approach is you start with what's actually working. So,
Mm-hmm.
how does that shift completely change the way someone approaches their life? And how they get to the end goal, starting with what's already working. I love that.
Yeah. So one exercise we do is called scaling exercise, and if we want to play along, we'll do a little bit of it. We can do a little bit of scaling because I think it
Yeah.
illustrates really well how identifying what's working really has a huge impact on you. Is first is that describing we already went down what do you want instead and what difference that will make or what impact that will have for your
Yep.
life,
Yep.
and we painted that picture. Would you notice you'd be doing, what would your family or friends notice you'd be doing, what difference would that make for them, and so we painted this full picture of this organized life, whatever that is for that person. And you've asked some great questions that would get there, and so now we say on a scale of 1 to 10, and 10 being that life, with
Mm-hmm.
all the difference it will make, and that piece, and 1 being the opposite. Where would you fall on that scale?
Um,
You might be a
I
little
would,
bit
yeah. Um, so I would say a 7, just
okay.
because in my physical space, I'm pretty organized, but when it comes to my digital space
Yeah.
and my business, I'm not as organized as I would like. I really struggle in that space of um like I'm just gonna leave it there. It's the physical stuff I can, that's easy for me, right? So that puts me at a high level. But then I start to come down when you talk about digital, computer, scheduling, all of that
Sure.
things. And I'm not at the bottom, but I do have a high standard for myself. So I feel like I drop
Okay.
significantly when it comes to that.
Okay, so you're a 7. Alright, so what makes you a 7 and not a 6?
Oh.
What makes you a 7 and not a 6?
um 6 is too close to 5.
Okay, yeah, well, what makes you, or even a 5, what makes you a 7 and not a 5 or 6? What puts you.
Yeah, I would say that I don't feel like I'm in the middle. I feel like I'm a little bit above average.
Why?
But I'm not uh maybe a 9 or a 10 where I would like to be. And I
So,
think it's more so up here.
okay, so, but you're, but so I kinda said some of that right now. You're a 7 because you have your physical space organized. You're 7 because, and not a 6 or 5 because, what else could you might come up with, you said you have some systems in place. You have some organization on your digital, piece.
Yeah, so I when I got an assistant, I had to become more
You
digitally
got it. So
organized.
you got an assistant. So an assistant keeps you at a 7, not a 5 or 6.
Yes, but before I was like a 4, 3.
Right.
And I had to up the ante so that I can bring my assistant in and make sure that like we're on the same page. So my assistant did boost my level of digital organization, but still
So
I'm
you have
not.
a yeah. So you have a you have an organized physical space. You have an assistant.
Yep.
Um, let's do one more. What else? What else do you have that keeps you at a 7 and that doesn't have you at a 5 or 6? What else do you do
I
well?
went through a lot of overbooking myself. And so now I'm more of a person that before I say yes, I'll say, let me get back to you. And so that's helped with me not overbooking myself and my scheduling and looking at my calendar before I agree to certain things and saying more no more often.
So you say no more often. You give yourself an opportunity to look at your calendar first before you say yes. You have an assistant, and you have a solid physical, organized space. So I just listed off, 4 things that you told me that
Yep.
you're doing well. What do you notice after I tell you those 4 things? What comes up for you?
Um, when you just said I listed out 4 things that you're doing well, I was like, oh, well, what am I not doing well?
Well, okay. So, but those are things that you are doing well. So that we would highlight those
Okay.
and say, okay, well, what are you doing? There's 2 questions. What are you doing? Which is you're doing your physical space. You hired the VA. You're giving yourself space, and you're saying no more. So how are you doing those things? That's the question that we would ask next, because those are the things that you're doing well, and that's why I said we want to look at what are you doing well already, because those are clues to how you can do other things well. Because we say, what are you doing, and how are you doing that? Because that gives you some clues into your own life. I can't come up with these solutions for you, because you're in your own work, you're in your own life, you have your own people around you, your surroundings. So we're trying to get you to come up, look at your being a detective into your own life and saying, okay, what am I doing well? How am I doing that? Maybe I have a regular meeting with my VA.
Intentionality, being intentional.
You sound like your calendar's a big thing. You sound like, your VA and being able to look at your calendar. So you're paying attention to your calendar. How might I use that more? And so those gives you clues. And so then I ask you to get you in. It's always about getting into motion, getting you into doing something. And so then I would ask you, okay, if you're going to move from a 7 to an 8, I don't need you to get to an 8. You just want to know if you're just moving just even a little bit in that direction. What would you be doing? Even the smallest thing that would tell you, hey, I'm actually on the road to being an 8. And we could look at your, like you said, you're being a detective in your own life and saying, well, what can I apply there? Or even something new you could come up with that tell you, hey, you know what? I'm actually moving in the direction of an 8.
Yeah. So for me, I would say get my morning and evening routine under control.
Okay.
I feel like like last night, I had a really hard time going to sleep. And I think it's because I came off of a break, right? And where my sleep was not I was just free for all, right? Going to bed when I wanted. And that's not my usual schedule. And I've noticed that the earlier I go to sleep, the more rested I feel, and the deeper I get to sleep, and the more rested I feel. So I feel more productive during the day.
You've answered the key questions, like what do you want and what difference will that make? You'll be more productive. Okay, on days that you do go to sleep, or just even go to sleep a little bit better, and you do feel that more productive, what do you notice you're doing on those days? So again, we're not always. Here's the fun part is we are not perfect. We don't even do our problems perfectly. So there's times
we mess up our mess ups.
Yeah. So on the days that we don't do when we do our problem a little bit less, or we are not at all, those are the days that we're looking for. Those are the days we're going to be the detective on. And so that day that you're coming off vacation, that's not a great day to be a detective on. But there's days in the past when maybe it was just a little bit better for you. What would you notice? What did you notice you were doing on those days? And that would be the clue to start working on your evening routine. And so you come up with some. I'd ask you a bunch of questions, figure out what those were, then you're like, all right, well, is one of those sound like something that you would be interested in doing? That would be easy for you to do, because we're just trying to get momentum. And when you talk about listening, and I listed all of the things that you are doing, not only is it clues to what you're doing well and how you're doing it, it's just to reinforce, hey, you are on that path. You are on that path to change, and trying to get just something, even the smallest thing going that's moving you from 7 to 8, to have you believe, like you said, it's in your head, having you believe that, hey, I am moving in that direction. That's all we're trying to get, is that this approach just gets so much momentum behind you, because instead of wasting time on the guilt and shame of of eating that half a pint of ice cream, I'm spending it all on the agency and the resources and the joy that I am bringing towards me moving from a 7 to an 8.
Yeah, that's so good. Like I'm sitting here trying to think, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I gotta dig deeper. And I was not prepared to dig deeper. I love it though, because what happens is when we stay surface level, like we just really don't get solutions. You
Yeah.
gotta dig deeper to see what's actually ask those continue to ask the same question over and over again in a different
5,000 different ways.
yeah. So, Glenn, before someone changes anything in their life, what are some quiet signals that tell a person, I may need to do something different, or I need to maybe call Glenn and have a call?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the key things is that most of this work is trying to align our actions with our values. And when something feels unright or doesn't feel like we're feeling good about it, that's because our behavior, our actions are not aligned with our values.
That's
And
so good.
and so some people, like, there's this, oh, what are your values? And then they go on and you check all the boxes and it's like, oh
Right,
yeah, I
right,
want to be
right, right.
this, this, and this. Of course I want to be all those things. That's like the perfect human being. I want to be all those things. But that's really hard to figure out. So it's so academic or, removed from yourself. But I love this trick is to look where when somebody bothers you or something bothers you or you bother yourself, that's a clue that you where your value is. So if you live in that cluttered house and it's bothering you, that means you value something other than that.
Different. Yes.
Others different. So don't beat yourself up because of that. That's actually a win. You've just noticed a value that you have, and that's the North Star that we need. We need to
Yes.
know what these values are, and they change over time in a lifetime. Obviously, when you're a kid, the messy
Absolutely.
bedroom doesn't bother you at all, so that you don't value that at all. But as you get older, our values change. You're like, I value this clarity that I get from the structured area or whatever that outcome, the difference that it will make for them. But that's again, when you notice that something bothering you, don't beat yourself up that's bothering you. Hey, no, that's a win. We won. We've got a value.
Yeah.
That's because it's so hard to make decisions in this always now instant feedback, data streaming, AI world that we live in, that
Yes.
when you have a value, that makes just shortcuts all the decision making process to, does this align with that person that I'm trying to become? And you're already trying to become that person because you're on this listening to this podcast.
That's right. That's right.
And you've identified a value. So that's what I'd say. When you're something feels out of sync, one, celebrate that, because that's a win to tell you, hey, I have a value here, and this is something that I want to pursue. And then, what do I want to do instead?
Yeah.
What's one thing, even the smallest thing that I
That's
tell them that I'm
right.
on that path every day? What's one small thing I tell them I'm on the path? And the reason it works so well for sustainable behavior change, why it lasts significantly over time, is because if I value my health, or if let's use health for example. If I value my health, and it's freezing cold, snowing outside, well, I can't go for that walk or that run or whatever that exercise that I did outside, or I can't even get to the gym because it's snowing outside. Okay, then I'm saying, oh, what the hell? I can't do my thing. I'm a runner. I can't do my thing, and so I won't do anything. But when I say, wait, I value my health now.
Yeah.
What else could I do today
Yeah.
that would say that I'm still valuing my health? Well, I can choose something good to eat. Maybe I can do an indoor movement, yoga, or actually whatever. But you come up with many paths to
Right.
the same river, is what we like to say. And the
Yes.
river is our values. That's what's flowing in our life. And so there's many paths there. So if we hit a rock on the path down to one way, down to the river, we can just get on another path and take that path to the river.
I love that. Many paths to the same river.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
river is the values.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Because a lot of times we think it's just one way.
Yeah.
It's one way. And it's
Because that's what we're told. We're told, like, oh, you have to do
true.
this protocol. You have to do this morning routine. You have to do this evening routine.
True.
Whenever you hear a have to or should to, run away from that, because that's imposing somebody else's values, their process on you. You are individual, you are powerful and unique. And so what is one thing that tells you first, where do you want to go? You don't listen to other people where they want to go. Where do you want to go? Because your life is your own. What difference will that make? And what's one thing I would, because that's my values. I'm telling myself that's where my values. And what's one way I could get there today?
Yeah. So one of the things I say all the time is like, I have no two clients the same.
I bet.
Like, I've organized many homes, many small businesses, and we never get the same result. We still use the same, pathway. We still use the same solutions or strategy, but we never do the same thing, right? So I love that you talk about changes without willpower, right?
Yeah.
So I want to touch on that a little bit. In your experience, what does maybe an organized system for energy or focus, or maybe even recovery look like when willpower is removed from the equation?
Well, it becomes so much more intrinsic. You're doing it because that's who you are. That's what you've painted that picture of that future that you want, and your brain has already been there in that future because you described it. So therefore, you don't need the willpower because you know that you want that outcome, and that there's many paths to get there. So I don't have to have the willpower to get over that that barrier because I'll just take a different path to get there. And so it's again, it's so much more joyful. This approach is so much more joyful than trying to have to hammer through some protocol that somebody said you had to do on the internet, or that doesn't fit your life. Because we are, just like, this is why the coach is not above you and the coach is not telling you what to do. Because
Right.
if I told you, Takilla, that okay, you need to do it this way. Now, when you go off and do it, you're gonna be like, the brains again is wily, and it'll be like, you know what, that was Glen's way of thinking, and that doesn't work for me, so I'm just not going to do it. But when I ask you, what's one thing you could do to go for your wind down routine, and when you told me that in the past, whatever the thing was, and I said, was that something you want to do? And you said, yes. You said that.
Yeah.
You said that, not me. So you're like, you've committed to that to yourself.
Yeah.
And again, even if you don't do it all the way or some way, you say, okay, what did I do, and what can I build? What can I build on from that? But it's not me giving you that advice, because then you'll work your way out of it. So willpower, yes, you can. Willpower is useful, obviously. It gets you to it's that when you feel that misaligned values, it's that thing that gets you that initial burst of energy to, like, you know what, I want to do something about this. What could I do instead? Let me start listening to Takilla's podcast. Let me call Stamina Lab. Whatever the motivation is, that first burst of willpower. We all have that here in I don't know when this is going to air, but we have it here in January for New Year, New You. And so we all have that burst of willpower. The reason New Year's resolutions don't last is because that willpower goes away, and oftentimes it's things we don't want to do, or we're trying to use willpower to muscle through there, and something blocks us from doing that. And when we have so much more focus on what we want instead, and what difference will that make, and then investigating our lives of how we could do it. That's what leads to sustainable behavior change. And like I said, the other approach, to go back and do the root cause analysis, that requires willpower, because I have to keep going through the guilt and shame, and I have to keep going through that over and over again. So that will work, okay? Because there's tons of research that shows that it does work. So I'm not going to say it doesn't work, but
is it sustainable?
It takes longer, and it does. It can be sustainable. It takes longer. People often drop out more because of the guilt and shame. They give up easier, and that that again, it might not be as sustainable. With this approach, it's more joyful. People stick with it longer, and they and then it is more sustainable, because it gives you more options, more ways of being that person you want to be.
Listen, being more joyful is the new goal, right? Doing things that bring you joy is like, it really does change the perspective of anything that you're doing, if it can bring you some type of joy. Right. So I love that approach, and you keep saying it. It's more joyful. It's more joyful, and I'm pretty sure that you're getting that from your clients. They're feeling that it's more joyful, right?
Yeah, one of my clients said that. Well, it wasn't my client. He was one of our coach's clients. He said that he was a business leader, sold his company, had made all this money, and but was not having didn't have all the things he wanted in life from his health perspective. And he's like, I felt like for my entire life I've been on defense, trying to solve
Mm.
it. And finally, with this approach, I feel like I'm on offense of my life. And
Aw,
that's really the 180-degree shift that you put into place. You are now have more control on your life. And it's just a perspective shift.
absolutely. I love that. So you talk about in your work the cognitive load, right? So how does the we talk about clutter here, right?
Yeah,
How does
definitely
that
cognitive.
mental clutter quietly sabotages even the most motivated people?
Yeah. So our cognitive load is, it's the static that's in our brain. I would say that's something that um, we really have. That's why having a coach is often helpful, because you need someone to continue to ask these questions to you on a regular basis, because it's often really difficult to try it. I mean, you can do it obviously, but that's what's we're trying to get that clutter, that noise out of
Mhm.
the cognitive load out of your brain, and even in the digital load, trying to set timers so you don't stay on the phone or the social media.
Yeah.
We're in a constant fight of this, because everything is built around
Lord.
us to just clutter our brains and add to that cognitive load. So we are in a this learning this approach. Learning to do this is not a nice to have. This is survival in our modern world, is to try to
Mm.
understand this, and to try to reduce our cognitive load, to be able to focus on that North Star, those values that we want. So that way, when that cognitive load is coming at us, we have a through line through it, because we can see. We look at everything that's happening in our lives as as a storm or the clouds, and that they come and go. Your thoughts come and go. The
Yeah.
cognitive load comes and goes, and it's all around. And some days it's a stormy day, sometimes it's a little more sunny. But you are the sky. You are the
Mm.
sky. You never change, and the sky is your values. That's who you are. And so,
Yeah.
with all that cognitive load and the clutter that's happening, if either physical or mental, or that's coming at you,
Right.
it's important to remember that you are the sky, and we're just trying to continue. We can fly through that. We can thrive through the storm, but we have to know where we're going, and that's to know our values.
Yeah. Inside of that, in that cognitive load, how can someone possibly get organized without adding more tasks to their plate, without adding more to their plate? Because a lot of times we want to, for me too. It's like, okay, well, let me do this. Like you're adding more to your plate instead of getting organized what you already have. In some cases, my clients, they'll go out and buy something else instead of dealing with what instead of going to wash their clothes, they'll just go buy more. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Instead of doing that. So how can we like get more organized without adding more tasks to our plate?
Yeah. Well, again, look for things that you already are doing. Where are you already?
Yeah.
Where are you already being organized? What are you doing there, and how are you doing that? That's evidence that you are already on the path to being organized. You are doing things, and just noticing. And maybe that's all you're doing, is just noticing where you are doing it, and that doesn't add more to your task. All you're doing is noticing. Be mindful of where you are, and that's a great place to start. Just notice where you are already
Mm,
doing things, because that's the tiny little shift that you're starting
yeah.
to make. The tiny little shift is that, wait, actually I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this. And that starts the momentum. That starts
Mm-hmm.
the ball moving. Now, adding something to that won't feel like a whole nother huge task that you're going to be doing, because you're oh yeah, actually I'm already moving. I'm already object in
Right.
motion is easier to stay in motion. Um, so you're like all you're just trying to do. Just the first step is just to notice where you are already doing it, and
Yeah.
then maybe how are you doing it, but just the noticing. If
Yeah.
anybody walks away today from this call, it's just is that to listen to just notice where you are already on the path to the person you want to be.
What's already working.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we stop measuring success by discipline, because that's a big word, right? And we start measuring it by sustainability, what would an organized life actually look like in 5 years? Like for a high performing person like myself and a lot of my clients, what would that look like?
So instead of discipline, what would be sustainable?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I know this is the solution focused approach way is just to know that where you want to go. What would that look like? Ask yourself that regularly. Where do I want to tell the cab driver to go? What difference will that
Mm,
make for me? What would that look like? Just continuing to paint that picture more vividly and more vividly. And as you move on this path to the person this organized life, that picture becomes much more clear, and you start to because you now you have a little bit more information, a little bit more about yourself. You've noticed more about yourself,
yeah.
and so now you can start painting in that picture even with more vivid details. You should ask what would my partner notice if I was that way, and
Yeah.
maybe even ask, that question, and being able to, because sometimes it's hard for us to imagine ourselves. So when we ask what would our kids notice? What would our pets notice? What would our partners,
Yeah.
what would our coworkers notice?
Yeah.
If we had the magic wand and we got to that place, what would they notice we would be doing differently?
Yeah.
And that gives us a third party perspective on it.
Yeah.
So that's where you don't need that discipline, because you've painted that picture so vividly that
Hmm.
it goes back to that motivation. It's the same idea, is that when you have that picture painted so vividly and you continually to visualize. So the biggest, best high performers, the military, NASA,
Yep.
any of those places, they all use visualization to be able to perform at their best. Athletes, concert pianists, they all visualize that performance in the most
Mm.
vivid detail, because again, that brain doesn't know the difference between the past, present, and the future. So when you visualize it, you've already been there. You've done it in the most detail. I mean, a fighter pilot, they visualize the smallest little movements of their hand. I've seen the training videos of the Blue Angels and how they do little training things where they're not even in the plane. They're just sitting there with their ping, and they do it. They have four of them around there, and they're cockpitting, like they're talking to
Yeah.
each other, moving this, that. They're just visualizing it in the smallest detail. So that way, when you
Mm.
get into it, it's already routine. You've already done it.
Yeah.
So that's where the discipline is in the visualization.
Ah. I've seen a shift in my life, and what I'm hearing you saying is like, be self aware. Like, look within, right? When I started to become more self aware and look at myself and say, what would I like to be different in my life? Like, how am I being right now? And how would I like to actually be? And start to make that adjustment. My life completely changed. I'm a 5 years, talking about 5 years from now. 5 years ago, I was a completely different human being.
I'm sure, and it's about not beating yourself because you're not that person you are trying to be. It's noticing where you're already on the path to that what you're
Yeah,
already doing. Noticing that first, and being mindful of that. So much of this is, like you said, being aware, being mindful,
yeah,
noticing, and those are all different ways to say the same same
yeah, yeah,
thing.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, listen, Glenn, thank you so, so much for being here and imparting your wisdom onto us. Can you give the Organized Life listeners one final word that you would like to leave them with? And please tell them how to find you and anything else you would like to share with the Organized Life listeners.
Sure. If you can find us at staminalab.io, that's stamina, LAB, single .io. And on there, you can get linked to all of our socials. We've got tons of videos on YouTube and Instagram that you can watch. It has all these different insights. Dr. Teplo and I riff about all kinds of things. There's some self assessments that you can take to start to get into the solution focused world. There's plenty you can get on there without actually getting a coach to get you on in that direction. And if you're interested in learning more about this and being able to do this with yourself, we have a fantastic training program as well. That's all at staminalab.io. And so the last piece of advice or wisdom or whatever you want to call it that I would say is, when you're on the path to being the person you want to be, is to be kind to yourself. There's no time or energy for that guilt or the shame. Be kind to yourself. Look for evidence where you're already on the path. If you do have a mistake or whatever you want to call it, like the half pint of ice cream, ask yourself, what kept me from doing more of this, or what kept me from doing it even worse? Because that shows your agency, your strength, and that's where you can be kind to yourself all the time.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome. Be kind to yourself. Love that. Well, again, thank you so much, Glen, for being here. You guys, I'll definitely have the information for the Stamina Lab inside the show notes, inside the description, depending on where you're watching this at. And you guys, remember that if whatever you're doing, it's not saving you space, time, energy, and money, here on the Organized Life podcast, we want to save in all 4 areas. You want to tweak it, revisit it, see what you can shift or change, see what's actually working, and see what you can do more of to help you save in those 4 areas. If you would like to be a guest here on the Organized Life podcast, or if you have a question for me or one of my guests here on the Organized Life podcast, send us an email at info@xtremeaudacity.com. That'll also be in the show notes or the description, depending on where you're watching. And we'll get you added into rotation. We'll get you your question added into rotation. And with that being said, ciao.
All right. Thank you.